everyone. Welcome to our webinar that's going to detail emotional intelligence and its importance in leadership. My name is Andy King, and I am currently an associate professor and associate program director at The Ohio State University. And within FAAEM, I currently serve as the Education Committee Chair. With me tonight, I have Dr. Abbey Smiley, who is a PGY2 emergency medicine resident at The Ohio State University. She has held several regional and national leadership positions and has a lot of knowledge in the sphere of emotional intelligence. This webinar was developed as a collaboration between the FAAEM Education and Faculty Development Committees as part of a series on leadership in academic emergency medicine. So without further ado, let's dive into emotional intelligence and its vital importance in leadership. So we have no financial disclosures. However, as I mentioned earlier, I do serve as the FAAEM Education Committee Chair, and I was asked to deliver this talk from FAAEM leadership and in conjunction with the education and faculty development committees within the organization. So objectives, what are we going to cover in this talk? So at the conclusion of this particular webinar, all of you will be able to define emotional intelligence and the 4 key components that make up emotional intelligence. You're going to develop strategies to increase your emotional intelligence, whether you have high or low emotional intelligence today with us. Hopefully you'll be able to leave with a toolbox on how to increase your emotional intelligence in the 4 key areas that we will describe. And you will be able to express the importance of emotional intelligence in effective leadership.
All right, so what is emotional intelligence? We can go on to our next slide. Emotional intelligence is a term coined by researchers Salovey and Mayer in 1990 and popularized by Daniel Goleman in the mid-90s with the publication of his book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, whose work makes up the foundation of this presentation. These psychologists made an early distinction in emotional intelligence, that is a skill set which is separate from both IQ and personality. In particular, emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive, manage, and evaluate the emotions of yourself and others. Emotional intelligence is both innate and learned. Physiologically, emotional intelligence is the communication between the emotional and rational centers of the brain. It is in essence a neural pathway that can be strengthened. Therefore, the more you think about what you're feeling and do something productive with that feeling, the more developed that pathway becomes. This means that another amazing thing about emotional intelligence is that it can be developed in others. We can move on to our next slide. The first model of emotional intelligence I'd like to introduce you to is Salovey and Mayer's model of emotional intelligence, illustrated by the PUUM model. It's comprised of 4 main branches. The first is the ability to perceive emotions and correctly express your emotions and other people's emotions accurately. In essence, this boils down to being able to understand what you're feeling, and as you progress, being able to understand what others are thinking and feeling as well. The second pillar is the ability to use emotions to facilitate thinking. At its most basic level, your emotions help to direct your thoughts. At the most advanced level, your emotions can be used to help you make good decisions and think more creatively. For example, think of a child who knows the exact right time to ask their parents' permission to sleep over at their friend's house, especially when their parents are in a particularly cheerful mood. The third pillar is use. So this is the ability to, to understand emotions, emotional language, and emotional signals. As this ability develops, you first develop the ability to distinguish basic emotions, and at the highest level, you're able to interpret complex emotions and the transition between emotions. The fourth is the ability to manage emotions, in order to achieve your goals. This ability develops with the ultimate goal to help you regulate your emotions and other people's emotions, tempering negative emotions and increasing positive emotions. While manipulating emotions on its surface may seem like a bad thing, when it's applied in the ability model of emotional intelligence, it actually can be used for the betterment of others and is a real vital trait for leaders. For instance, if you had a resident or coworker who you really noticed was struggling with something emotional at work, an emotionally intelligent leader would be able to pull them aside and meet that emotional need by either giving a pep talk or a heart-to-heart conversation. Next slide. The second model of emotional intelligence is by Daniel Goleman, and he identified 5 main pillars of emotional intelligence, which are self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation, empathy, and social skills and relationship management. We'll go on to discuss each of these in more detail. We can go on to our next slide. The first pillar is self-awareness. Mayer identified 3 distinctive styles people tend to fall into when experiencing emotion: those who are engulfed by their emotions, those who are accepting of their emotions, and those who are self-aware. Those who are engulfed by their emotions often feel overwhelmed and are not aware of their emotions and do not have any ability to control their emotions. Those who are accepting are aware of their emotions, but they don't feel like they can do anything to change their emotions. Self-aware people are both aware of their emotions and can control them. Self-awareness is your brain in neutral, simply giving you the ability to quickly identify and name your emotions as you experience them. Then taking it one step further, you're able to perform an accurate self-assessment and you possess self-confidence. You're aware of what's happening, but you're hovering above the situation rather than being immersed in it. A self-aware person at its heart manages their emotions. As a leader, having self-awareness means having an accurate assessment of your own strengths and weaknesses as well. We can go on to our next slide. Our second pillar is self-regulation. Managing our emotions is a full-time job, and although we have less control over when we feel an emotion, we do have control over how long it will last. That control is a skill of self-regulation. Emotional intelligence is comprised of several different traits, including adaptability and optimism, and is highly related to self-awareness and motivation. If you are strong in areas of self-regulation, you're more likely to view challenges as opportunities for future improvement and can look at the glass as half full instead of half empty. In a 1960 study by Richard Albert examining test anxiety in students, they found that pre-test anxiety either hurt or helped students. Despite having similar anxieties between these 2 groups of students, it was found that students that were strong in self-regulation were able to use their anxiety to motivate their studying, and they did much better than those students who simply let their anxieties overwhelm them. We can move on to our next slide. Our third pillar is internal motivation. Daniel Goleman defines emotional intelligence, internal motivation, as a variety of self-management whereby we mobilize our positive emotions to drive us towards our goals. Internal motivation focuses on internal rewards, meaning that you engage in a behavior activity because you enjoy the process rather than the result and reward. For example, you want to go to the gym to work out because you really enjoy that process of getting stronger and working towards a PR, maybe listening to some good music, rather than just going to the gym because you want to lose some weight for that vacation coming up. There are 4 main elements of internal motivation, which are personal drive, commitment, initiative, and optimism. And optimism was found to be particularly powerful among these 4 main elements. Optimism is a strong belief that everything will be okay despite setbacks. In a 1984 study at the University of Pennsylvania, illustrated that the most powerful predictor of freshman student scores was actually a test of optimism rather than their high school GPA or their SAT scores. All right, we can move on to our next slide. Empathy. Having empathy means having the ability to sense what others are thinking or feeling, taking an active interest in their concerns, and picking up on subtle emotional cues. A leader with empathy should be able to place themselves in the place of their team member's shoes, and using that perspective, help to develop their team member and team appropriately. It's important to acknowledge here that empathy can be significantly impacted by environment. In a famous 1973 Princeton study, men were assigned to give a talk about either the Good Samaritan or to talk about getting good jobs. Just before giving the assigned talk, they were also told that they were already late to their talk or had plenty of time to get there. Then a distressed person was planted on their path to work, and the researchers observed who would stop to help the distressed man. As it turns out, the biggest factor influencing who would stop was not the person primed to help by being assigned the Good Samaritan talk, but those who were told that they had plenty of time to get to the talk. Amazingly, all the men who were in this study were seminarians who had chosen the religious life to help people, and having ample time was still the greatest determinant of who would stop to help. Therefore, leaders in medicine must examine external pressures such as prioritization of seeing high quantities of patients over the quality of patient care, greater time on administrative tasks and less time spent with patients, and increasingly high rates of physician burnout and their impact on physicians' empathy. We can move on to our next slide. There are three main types of empathy identified by researchers, and what differs between these three are the amount of sympathy felt for the other person, which is your ability to feel what that other person is feeling, and how you're able to use that empathy to help others. Effective empathy, otherwise known as compassionate empathy, is the ability to feel someone's pain and take action to help. Compassionate empathy is usually the most appropriate type of empathy because a person receives both understanding and the appropriate sympathy or emotional empathy from that person. Somatic empathy is being able to feel what another person is feeling. For example, feeling distress for someone else's pain. Researchers describe emotional empathy in three parts: feeling the same emotion as the other person, then feeling their own distress in response to their pain, and finally, feeling compassion towards the other person. Emotional empathy can be destructive in someone without self-regulation, as these emotions can at times be overwhelming, resulting in a phenomenon called empathy overload, which prevents the person from having the appropriate response. Therefore, somatic empathy differs from effective empathy in that the person is overly sympathetic and therefore cannot respond appropriately. Cognitive empathy is our final type of empathy, and it means being able to step into someone else's shoes. Cognitive empathy differs from effective empathy and somatic empathy in that it is empathy in thought only, without taking on the emotions of the other person. Therefore, cognitive empathy lacks sympathy for the other person. Move on to our next slide. Social skills are the final component of emotional intelligence, and in essence, are the ability to handle and influence other people's emotions effectively, tying all of the other components of emotional intelligence together. The term covers a wide range of abilities, from persuasion to conflict management to leadership to team building skills, communication skills, and more. Social skills can be separated down further into four main abilities. One is the ability to organize groups, an essential leadership skill which involves recruiting, motivating, coordinating efforts of people. The second is the ability to negotiate solutions or resolve conflict. The third is the ability to form personal connections with others. And the fourth is a skill of social analysis, or having the insight about the feelings, motivations, and concerns of others. However, social skills are not where emotional intelligence ends, but instead, all five of these components, self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation, empathy, and social skills, coexist together rather than building off each other to form emotional intelligence. And now I'll hand it over to Dr. King for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Abby. Moving on. So this is the most popular sort of framework for emotional intelligence in the literature. And it was initially coined by Daniel Goleman, who's kind of the, I guess, the godfather of emotional intelligence. And the four emotional intelligence skills that are paired, they're paired up under two primary competencies. And these are personal competence and social competence, as you can see here on the graph. Personal competence is made up of your self-awareness and self-management skills, which focus more on you as an individual than on your interactions with other people. The personal competence is your ability to stay aware of your emotions and manage your behavior and tendencies and how you are putting those off to others. In contrast, social competence is made up of your social awareness and relationship management skills. Social competence is your ability to understand other people's moods, behaviors, and motives in order to improve the quality and understanding of your relationships. So the first that we're going to talk about is self-awareness. Self-awareness is your ability to accurately perceive your own emotions in the moment and understand your tendencies across various situations. The only way to genuinely understand your emotions is to spend enough time thinking through them as they occur to figure out where they come from and why they are there. People who are high in self-awareness are remarkably clear in their understanding of what they do well, what motivates and satisfies them, and which people and situations push their buttons. When you are ultimately self-aware, you're more likely to pursue the right opportunities, put your strengths to work, and most importantly, keep your emotions from holding you back. Next, we'll talk about self-management. Self-management is what happens when you act or do not act on a particular emotion. It is dependent on your self-awareness, and it is the second major part of personal competence. Self-management is your ability to use your awareness of your emotions to stay flexible and direct your behaviors in a positive manner. Real results come from putting your momentary needs on hold to pursue larger, more important goals. The third competence that is included within emotional intelligence that we're going to touch on is social awareness. Social awareness is your ability to accurately pick up on and digest emotions that you perceive in other people and understand what is really going on within them. This often means perceiving what other people are thinking and feeling, even if you may not be feeling the same way as them. Social awareness ensures that you stay focused and absorb critical information. One particular example is, the past 18 to 24 months, we've been having meetings on Zoom. It's very easy to kind of tune out and turn off our cameras. But a high level of social awareness is to keep your camera on and really pay attention to the cues that are going on in the meeting. Social awareness is a way that you remain focused and absorb critical information within these various meetings. Listening and observing are the keystones of social awareness. Finally, we're going to touch on and define relationship management. Relationship management is your ability to use your awareness of your own emotions and those of others to manage interactions successfully. This ensures clear communication and the effective handling of conflict within the various teams that you have, both at home and at work. So we spent the first portion of this talk defining emotional intelligence and its key components, but let's talk a little bit about why it's important. As we continue this talk, I want you all to think of both the most and least effective leaders that you've encountered in your career. What traits of emotional intelligence did they excel in? What traits did they lack? As we continue the talk, we will begin discussing the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership as defined by some data, as well as tangible strategies to increase emotional intelligence. Whether you have high emotional intelligence walking into this talk, or if you're one that has some struggles with emotional intelligence, I think all of you will be able to leave with a toolbox in order to help increase your emotional intelligence moving forward. So this is a pretty telling graphic on the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace. So not education, not knowledge, not experience. None of these three serve as an accurate predictor of why people succeed or struggle in the workplace. It's something else. And Goleman and a lot of his associates have really spent a lot of their career defining what that is, and they've come up with emotional intelligence. As you can see from this graphic, 90% of the top performers in industry were found to have high emotional intelligence. They also found that emotional intelligence is responsible for almost 60% of your job performance. And they also found that those who are high in emotional intelligence earn up to $30,000 more than those with lower emotional intelligence. People with the highest levels of intelligence outperform those with average IQ only 20% of the time, while people with average IQs outperform those with higher IQs 70% of the time. The reason for that is emotional intelligence. The impact of high emotional intelligence on leadership is overwhelming within the literature. Leaders with high emotional intelligence are almost universally promoted at a higher rate due to their more effective and efficient team performance and leadership. Leaders who exhibit a high degree of emotional intelligence are more likely to be followed and obtain positive results. They are often decisive, warm and sociable, detailed, strong listeners who almost invariably consider the ideas and performance of all of their team members. They are assertive, but they're not bossy. They promote growth rather than fixed mindsets within their team, and they ensure accountability without being overly critical. So these are a few signs of low emotional intelligence. I'm sure all of you on this call have been in the presence of someone with lower emotional intelligence that have led a team. So think back on some of those leaders and think through what characteristics made someone an ineffective leader to you. 2/3 of people are controlled by emotions and are unskilled at spotting them and using them to their benefit. In fact, those with low emotional intelligence often suffer from emotional hijacking. So what is emotional hijacking? With this, the more intense the emotion, the more likely that they are to dictate your actions. Importantly, as human beings, we have no control over our emotions, but we have control on the thoughts and reactions that follow. A trigger event generates prolonged emotional responses. As your emotional intelligence continues to grow, you'll learn to spot triggers and practice productive ways of suppressing and responding to those particular triggers. As I mentioned before, no matter whether we measure high or low in emotional intelligence, we can constantly work to improve it. Now that we've discussed both the importance of high emotional intelligence in leadership and traits associated with low emotional intelligence, let's return to Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence quadrant to discuss strategies to improve in each of the four main components of emotional intelligence. First, we will talk about self-awareness. Here we have 7 key tools in which to improve your self-awareness. The first, keep a journal about your emotions. The biggest challenge to developing self-awareness is objectivity. With a journal, you can record what events triggered strong emotions within you and how you responded to them, and return and reflect on these emotions and responses at a later date. Get to know yourself under stress. You benefit tremendously from learning to recognize your first signs of stress. Your self-awareness in times of stress serve as your third ear to listen to your body's cry for help. Take some time each day to realize and recognize these signals and recharge your emotional battery before stress causes permanent damage to your system. Watch yourself like a hawk. Take notice of your emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors, right as the situation unfolds in order to slow yourself down and understand your emotion and resultant behavior. Visit your values. Check in with yourself and shut down your core beliefs and values. Know who and what pushes your buttons. Knowing who pushes your buttons and how they do it is critical to developing the ability to take control of the situation, maintaining your voice, and calming yourself down. Having a clear understanding of who and what pushes your buttons makes these people and situations a bit less difficult because they come as less of a surprise. Stop and ask yourself why you do the things that you do. Your self-awareness will grow abundantly when you begin seeking out the source of your feelings. Get in the habit of stopping to ask yourself why your suppressing emotions come to the surface and what motivated you to do something out of character. The better you understand why you do the things that you do, the better equipped you will be to keep your emotions from running the show. And quit treating your feelings as good or bad. Suspend your judgment of your emotions and allow them to run its course and vanish. This allows you to understand your emotions and what they ultimately do and how you project them. So the rest of our toolbox for improving self-awareness is listed here on this slide, and I'll go through and talk a little bit more about each of these. So number 8, observe the ripple effect from your emotions. Emotions are ultimately the primary drivers of your behavior. It's important to understand the effect that they have on other people. Ensure that you are observing the ripple effects of your emotions and closely watch how they impact other people immediately, and then use that information as a guide for how your emotions are bound to affect a wider circle long after the emotion is present. In regards to this skill, reflection is key. Lean into your discomfort. The biggest obstacle to increasing self-awareness is the tendency to avoid the discomfort that comes from seeing yourself for who you really are. Rather than avoiding a feeling, your goal should be to move toward that emotion, into it, and eventually through it, ultimately understanding it. Allow yourself to feel your emotions physically. One of the most effective ways to understand our emotions as they are happening is to learn how to spot the physical changes that accompany each emotion. How do you feel when you're angry? How do you feel when you're happy? How are you projecting yourself when you're sad? Taking time to reflect on those and how you're feeling physically. Check yourself. Without question, how you feel is reflected on how you look. Your facial expressions, your posture, your demeanor, your clothes, and even your hair all say important things about your mood. We've all had shifts in the emergency department where I'm sure I can speak for myself where my hair has been all out of whack because I'm stressed out. Um, you know, keep in mind that our appearance projects how we're feeling at the time. Spot your emotions in books, movies, and music. If you're having trouble looking within to discover your emotional tendencies, you can discover the same information by looking outside yourself at the movies, in music, and books that you identify with. And finally, seek feedback. Self-awareness is the process of getting to know yourself from the inside out and the outside in. Others' views can be a real eye-opener by showing you how other people experience you. Putting their perspectives together helps you see the entire picture, including how your emotions and reactions affect other people. Next, we'll move on to talk about social awareness. How do we improve social awareness? Social awareness is a skill used to recognize and understand the moods of other individuals and entire groups of people. Instead of looking inward to learn about and understand ourselves, social awareness is looking outward to learn about and appreciate others. The first skill in our toolbox for improving social awareness: practice the art of listening. Listening requires focus, and focus is not easy, especially in emergency medicine, because we're stretched in several different directions. Listening isn't just about hearing words. It's also about listening to the tone, the speed, and the volume of the voice, and about how they're attending to you in the conversation. Step into another person's shoes. It's for all of us who want to gain perspective and a deeper understanding of others, improve our communication, and identify problems before they escalate. It's always important to help understand where others are coming from by stepping into their shoes to try and feel what they're feeling. Make timing everything. As you practice your timing, remember that the key to social awareness is focusing on others instead of on yourself so that you can be more effective. Don't take notes at meetings. Similar to what I mentioned earlier about the meetings on Zoom. While having your head focused on your tablet and your hands scribbling away, you often miss the critical clues that shed some major light on how others are feeling or what they may be thinking during a topic of a meeting. Go on a 15-minute tour. Take some time to walk around where you work and notice your surroundings. Take a short walk and visit people in the office. This will help you get in tune with other people and their emotions, and will help to refocus your attention onto some of the smaller yet critical social clues that exist right under your nose. Understand the rules of the culture game. The secret to winning the culture game is to treat others how they want to be treated, not how you would want to be treated. The trick is identifying the different rules for each culture and taking the time to learn them and to genuinely have interest in learning those skills. Skill number 8, catch the mood of the room. Emotions are contagious, meaning that they spread from one or two people until there's a palpable and collective feeling that you all will feel at some level. Next, we'll move on to talk about the third skill, which is self-management. So how do we improve self-management? Self-management is your ability to use awareness of your emotions to actively choose what you say and what you do. First, breathe right. Shallow breaths deprive your brain of oxygen, which can lead to poor concentration, forgetfulness, mood swings, restlessness, depressed and anxious thoughts, and an overall lack of energy. Shallow breathing can certainly affect the ability to self-manage. Create an emotion versus a reason list. Whenever you find your mind having a battle of the emotional and rational brains, take some time to make a list that distinguishes the emotional side of the argument from the rational one. Give it some time. Sit it on the shelf and return and reflect on those things to help understand what you were thinking in that period of time. Make your goals public. Much of self-management comes down to motivation, and you can use the expectations that other people have of you as a powerful force to get you off the proverbial couch. Count to 10. Even if you don't make it to double digits, you'll stop the flow of frustration and anger long enough to cool down your overheated limbic system and give your rational brain some time to catch up. Sleep on it. Give yourself that extra day, week, or month to digest the situation before moving forward. Sometimes that's all you need to stay in control of a particular situation. Talk to a skilled self-manager. Role models come in all shapes and sizes, and they influence our lives in ways that are hard to predict. Reach out. It's important to have a mentor. They can share skills, share experiences. How did they react in particular situations? This is important in developing as a self-manager. Smile and laugh more. It's nice to know you have an easy out when you need to put on a happy face. Think of something funny. If you're in a tense situation and you need to help manage some of your emotions, think of something funny, have a laugh. Set aside some time in your day for problem solving. A 15-minute period each day where you turn off your phone, walk away from your computer, and take time just to think is a great way to ensure that your decisions aren't modeled by your emotions. Next, take control of your self-talk. The thoughts that are most influential are those where you literally talk to yourself. I at times have a pessimistic self-talk. It's important to suppress these in order to make sure that you're maximizing your self-management skills. Try and remain optimistic. Try and keep attention to your goals. Push forward. Don't try and self-destruct, if you will. Visualize yourself succeeding. Visualizing yourself managing your emotions and behavior effectively is a great way to practice these new skills and make them into habits. Even if this is while you're lying in bed at night as you're getting ready to go to sleep, envision yourself managing your emotions and behaviors effectively. Envision yourself in a stressful situation, keeping calm, cool, and collected. As you think about it, you'll find that it'll become part of your skill set. Clean up your sleep hygiene. Self-management requires patience, flexibility, and alertness which are the first things to go to. That are the first things to go when you don't get a good night's sleep. Focus your attention on freedoms rather than your limitations. Even when you can't do or say anything to change a difficult situation, you always have a say in your perspective of what's happening, which ultimately influences your feelings about it. Stay synchronized. When you're doing a good job of managing your emotions, your body language will fit the emotional tone of the situation. It's when you become dysynchronous that things start to get out of whack. Accept that change is around the corner. Admit to yourself that even the most stable, trusted facets of your life are not completely under control. And finally, we will move on and talk about the final skill in the quadrant, relationship management. Relationship management is an important and the fourth sort of key component of the emotional intelligence paradigm. It's most often used. Working on relationships take time. We all have friendships. We all have relationships. We all know that they take time, effort, and know-how. The know-how is emotional intelligence. How do we improve this skill? First, be open and curious. Maintaining relationships may not be on your job description and may not have even been discussed when you took a job. But for you to be successful, being open and curious is absolutely and an unequivocal part of your job. Being an open book on your end isn't the whole story with managing a relationship. You also need to be interested and invested in the other person's story as well. Enhance your natural communication style. Your natural communication style shapes your relationships. Avoid giving mixed signals. Feelings express truth, and they have a way of rising to the surface through reactions and body language, despite the words we choose. People trust what they see over what they hear. Remember that little things pack a punch. Make a habit of incorporating thank yous, please, and I'm sorry when needed in order to maintain your relationships. Take feedback well. Feedback is a unique gift. It's meant to help us improve in ways that we perhaps could not have seen on our own. Take a person's feedback seriously and try what he or she suggested. They have given you an ultimate gift. There may be no better way to solidify your relationship with him or her than by accepting and incorporating their feedback. Build trust. Trust is a peculiar resource. It's built rather than depleted by use. Trust is something that takes time to build. It can be lost in seconds, and it may be the most important and most difficult objective in managing our relationships. And finally, have an open door policy. Increasing your accessibility can only improve your relationships. It literally opens the door to communication, even if it's virtual. People will feel valued and respected because of the time that you're given to them, and you get the opportunity to learn about others. Only get mad on purpose. Expressing anger in inappropriate ways to communicate your strong feelings remind people of the gravity of the situation. Expressing anger too much or at the wrong time can desensitize people to what you're feeling, making it hard for others to take you seriously. Don't avoid the inevitable. Address uncomfortable situations and relationships head on, and do so sooner rather than later. Acknowledge the other person's feelings. Everyone has a right to experience feelings, even if you may not feel the same way. You don't have to agree with the way people are feeling, but you do have to recognize his or her feelings as legitimate, respect them, and understand them. When you care, show it. Don't hesitate or put it off until next week. Do something this week or even today. Anything that shows how you are feeling is all you need to make an impact and strengthen your relationship. It could be something as simple as a thank you. Explain your decisions. Don't just make them. Instead of making a change and expecting others to just accept it, take time to explain the why behind the decision, including alternatives that were considered and why the final choice made the most sense in the long run. If you can ask for ideas and input ahead of time, it's even better. That builds trust. Finally, acknowledge a decision that will affect everyone. People appreciate transparency and openness. Transparency and openness make people feel trusted, respected, and connected to you as a leader and to the organization as a whole. Make your feedback direct and constructive. Giving feedback is a relationship building event that requires all 4 emotional intelligence skills to be effective. Use them. And the final tool for our toolbox, tackle a tough conversation. Start with an agreement. Ask the person to help you understand his or her side. Resist the urge to plan a comeback or a rebuttal. Help the other person understand your side too. But ultimately, let them speak first. Move the conversation forward. Keep in touch and reflect on what you learned from one another. Hopefully you all learned a little bit about emotional intelligence. We'll try and cut it off here and allow you to ask some questions. Looks like there's a question in the chat that Melissa put in. Is there an assessment we can take to evaluate our emotional intelligence objectively? There is an emotional intelligence assessment tool. You can Google it. It does cost a little bit of money. One way that I would recommend getting around that, you can purchase, there's a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, where you have a resource and you have a key to take the assessment for free. I don't have anything else. Abby, do you have anything else?
I do not. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for attending. Hope you guys have a great rest of the evening. I appreciate your attention.